Hey Daddy Story Manifestor, I am so glad you're here. On this channel we give you writing pep talks, writing mindset advice and all things storytelling. I'm Leah Foles, writer, actor and mindset coach, and today we're talking about 3 beliefs that every writer should adapt to make their writing journey more motivating and just easier. Let's jump in. To start with a few words on beliefs. What we choose to believe defines our reality. That sounds kind of like out there, but it really is true. Because our beliefs create what is actually possible for us. For example, if we don't believe traveling is safe, we won't hop on that airplane and travel to a beach, no matter how good the beach looked like. It's something that would be nice, but it is out of reach. It's out of reach because of the story we tell ourselves from our beliefs. So our beliefs create stories, and those stories directly influence our decisions and our actions, and those actions and decisions then create our reality. If you think you're inherently bad at talking to people, every time you approach a new conversation, you're going to start from a bit of an awkward, insecure place because you have this story around it that you're not good at it. So you're setting yourself up, and that's not your fault, by the way. A lot of environmental factors, how we grow up, a lot of things create our beliefs and define them and mold them. The thing is, we need to take back charge over them. We need to take back charge over the stories we tell ourselves, because that's how we can create a much more fun and ease and beautiful reality for ourselves. So that's why we're talking about beliefs today, and that's why we're talking about what beliefs we should adapt and practice regularly as writers to make our writing journey much more motivating, much easier, and more achievable, because writing a book can be very intimidating. There's many more beliefs that are going to support you on your writing journey, but these are just 3 empowering ones that will really help you get started and stick with it. Number 1, I will know what to do when the time comes. This belief counters the fear of not doing it right or failing at your story, and it also helps you stick with it. Because if you know that you're going to figure it out in time, it's not as intimidating when you have no clue at the moment. Writing is daunting. There's thousands of craft books, even more opinions, and that's not even taking into account your own imagination, all the possibilities, and the blank page. All of that can be really daunting and overwhelming. Everything is possible. So how can we avoid the overwhelm and see it more as, opportunities that everything is possible, and not, oh gosh, everything is possible, so nothing is possible right now? We need to tell ourselves that we have all the knowledge we need already inside of us. We have all the knowledge we need at this moment to create exactly what we're supposed to create at this moment. And all the other knowledge will come to us on the way. It's a process, it's a journey for a reason, because creativity and ideas need time to blossom, and they need time to, be processed in the back of your brain. They need time and they need inspiration to nurture and feed them along the way. Be it a song, be it a building that you see. There's so many things that add to it and that inspire us along the way that we cannot come to the page with originally. Even if you have an intricate plot yet, writing books can take, a long time. And in that time, you personally grow, your views on things change, your understanding of people change, and your understanding of your characters change. You get to know them so much more. So you'll be able to understand them more and mold things much better. So if you did create a big plot and there's things that don't quite feel as strong yet, or as punchy, or as truthful, don't worry about it, because you will have that knowledge. It's coming to you along the way. You just don't start out with it. Another important part to remember for this belief is that every time you write, you get better. You learn much more tools and tricks. And if along the way, along the journey of writing your book, in the 2 years, let's say, to get it, from first plot point on the page to completed edited novel, during that whole journey, if you engage with any kind of writing content, you're going to pick up more things. So for example, this video is writing content. If you're on YouTube, I'm sure you've looked at other AuthorTube videos. Do look into my description. I have some like beautiful videos that I absolutely love, that have very much informed me. I personally am a huge fan of Kate Kavanagh. She's totally influenced how I approach my writing process, and has taught me a lot along the way. So there's so many voices out there, and that's the thing where it can be overwhelming at first, but if you know that just taking it in and enjoying it for the enjoyment reason over the time that it takes for you to write your book will actually influence and grow you without you having to sit down and saying, okay, I need to grow right now, I need to figure it out right now. It'll come to you. Remember, and this is not a bad thing, although it can be intimidating, writing and editing a book takes years. And when I first started, that sounded terrible, you know? You just wanna, you have the story and you wanna read it. That's why we write in the first place, because we're really passionate about wanting to read those stories and wanting to hold those stories. But the process is where they really blossom and become themselves. One thing that is great about getting to know your characters more is that they will take you through moments that couldn't have been premeditated. The more you know them, the closer you get to be with them in the scene. And when you're with them in the scene, their perspective completely overrules your own. So when you plot and when you sit down and when you imagine scenes, you know, even if you're like me, more of a discovery writer, you still imagine scenes. But you imagine scenes half through the character and story lens and half through your own lens. But when you sit down to write, that character's lens becomes that character lens becomes the foreground, because it becomes what you're writing the words through. You know, you're writing the story through their eyes, so you are looking through everything through their eyes, and that gives you details and emotions and aspects of the story that you couldn't see otherwise. And another thing to keep in mind for the belief that yes, you will know what to do when the time comes, is that the reader's perspective differs greatly from the writer's perspective. And you will read your draft at least once, or you know, 20 times, before you're done. You will read your words over and over again, and you will... Okay, wait, before you're done, I mean before you're done editing in general, not necessarily before the first draft. I don't recommend that. I like reading whatever I write like first draft to my wife, because then I feel like I get a little bit of the validation already for having written, but I don't sit down and write and edit and read and edit while I'm writing the first draft, because that can be distracting. Side note. But when you read it through after each draft, you'll take things in from the reader's perspective, and that will give you information on how to fix things that you had no idea how to fix in the writer's perspective. Or it's, you know, in the writer's perspective, sometimes scenes don't quite feel right, but you don't know why. But as the reader, you then completely understand it. For example, I had a scene that I was really passionate about and is one of my favorite moments, but something didn't quite work. And then I read through it as a reader and realized, oh, the time jump isn't clear, so the pacing is off. That's not something that I really understood while writing, but that's something I understood while reading. So trust yourself that once that reader perspective comes into play, it'll completely illuminate new aspects of the story. If you don't know how to fix something right now, trust that you will in time and just write through it. This can be a little disheartening sometimes. In my first draft, I had a chapter I was so stuck on. I just wasn't connecting with the character. I wasn't sure what the purpose in the story is, and I just wrote through the chapter. And then, when I was reading it through afterwards, I had the realization I couldn't get through it because the character doesn't belong in the story. And that's a bit of a shocking thing, but if you see everything as opportunities, then it can also become a very exciting thing, because it's a moment of like, oh, that's why it wasn't working. But from the writer's perspective, you know, you're trying to make everything work, so you don't realize things like that. Trust that you'll understand what the trouble is later, and then you'll be able to fix it, because, as I mentioned earlier, you've grown at that point, so it'll be fine. Please, trust that your future self is perfectly capable of editing your book. Right now, you are providing the mold. That's all you need to do. You're not providing the sculpture. Your future self is going to provide the sculpture. And this is a beautiful thing that's going to, if you practice this belief, it's totally going to reflect positively in other areas of your life because it nurtures trust in yourself. And the more you trust yourself, the less perfect you have to be in the moment, because you know every step you're taking is taking you closer to a point where you will know better. So trust it, your future self will know what to do. Number 2, if I love it, others will. Oh, the insecurities, embarrassment and shame that come up around our stories, right? Is it just me? I'm sure it's not just me. Before we go into the empowering belief, let's talk about where the crappy insecurities come from. Now, writing is a form of communication, storytelling is a form of communication, and we're conditioned to crave stories to understand each other, understand the human perspective, understand the human condition, and understand the world that we live in. We read and write to communicate and to connect with other people. At the same time, one of our primal fears, oldest fears, is the fear of not belonging. This is why we're so scared that what we're writing is not going to connect to other people, that it's weird, because we're trying to honestly communicate. Now, it is through storytelling and all of that, but it does capture our perspective on life as well. There's always an author's voice in our work. And if that voice doesn't connect to anyone, it's terrifying because we're suddenly excluded from the pack. Like, what if we believe we belong, but then our writing reveals that we don't? That's where the fear comes from. It's vulnerable and it's honest communication. And that's one of the scariest things we can do as people. Now that we understand this fear, let's dismantle it. It comes down to one reassurance that we all need regularly. And I'm speaking from the heart here, I need it a lot too. And that's this. You're not alone. If you care about something, others will. What you like, others do. What you connect to, others do as well. No one is alone. No one is a singular being that is the only one that feels that way. It's just not how the world works. What you experience, someone else is experiencing, has experienced, or will experience. So back in the Stone Age, where this whole primal fear came from, your taste might differ from the rest of the tribe. Like you might be the outsider, but we live in a global world where we can connect with billions of people. You are not alone in there. And you know how I can tell you're not alone? You are connecting to stories. You are. If you're a writer, I'm sure you have a favorite book. I'm sure you have things that or TV shows and movies, things that really light you up. And if they're able to really light you up, that's communication with the creator. Those stories really light the creator up and they light you up. So clearly connections exist. So clearly other people love what you love. If you have any fandom that anyone else is in there, you connect to these people on some level and your stories will do the same. This is so hard to remember. I really understand. Just yesterday I was struggling with it. But that's why we need to repeat this belief to us. If you love something, others will as well. And this goes to any part of the story. So in my fantasy debut novel, Goddess of Limbo, that's coming out in June 2021, I ended up exploring some subjects that are really dark, and I was really nervous around it. Like, I felt very drawn to it. I felt very drawn to these narratives, but I wasn't quite sure why, and I felt weird for wanting to write very dark things. And I know, I'm sure a lot of you have seen that meme, that office meme of like when you write something dark and you start worrying about yourself. Yeah, we can all relate to that, right? So here's the thing though. I was very self-conscious when I sent that part out for my early readers, and it turns out they really connected with it and thought it was beautiful. Like, it was very cathartic and beautifully handled, and it moved them. And I was very scared that it would be exploitative, but it didn't feel exploitative to me, and it didn't feel exploitative to others. So even when you're drawn to really dark aspects, don't judge yourself for it, because there's a reason the story is coming through you. I mean, of course, look at it from a bit of an analytical eye and make sure you're not doing any toxic representation. So investigate why you want to write it, but then if you don't find anything harmful, if it calls your name, go for it. The story wants to be told through you. And honestly, there's so many dark aspects in our world that need light shine onto and that needs to be processed for all of us. And we process things collectively as people. We process things through our culture, through our art, through our stories. So if something needs to be processed, even if it's dark, it's very important that it comes through writers and that writers take the risk to tell those stories. So if it calls you, if it lights you up, even when it doesn't quite make sense, trust that. It will also light others up. It will be helpful for others to read. Number 3, every word written makes you a writer. Now this sounds really straightforward, but I bet you struggle with it because I need to remind myself that every time I sit down and write a word. Every word that you write makes you a writer. Maybe you're genuinely able to call yourself a writer, but you still leave writing sessions disappointed in yourself. You still feel like you're not meeting your own expectations. Or maybe you're even struggling to embrace that label of a writer in the first place because you haven't proven yourself to be one yet. You haven't proven it to yourself yet. You don't believe that you have earned the label of a writer yet. Either way, those are limiting beliefs that are holding you back. Now, this comes from us and society putting all these definitions on what it means to be a writer. Every time we sit down, there's, I told you already, it's good to be part of the community, but that also gives us a lot of different pictures of what a writer looks like, who a writer is. And it's natural for us, if we care about something, to try to match the criteria. So if we take all of this in as a criteria, there's suddenly this big pressure on what it means to be a writer, and we have to fulfill all of that every time we sit down. We forget that no successful writer sits down and writes and is successful and creates brilliance exactly the same way or creates brilliance immediately. The only thing they all have in common is that they consistently trusted themselves to write and that they stayed with it, that they stayed with their stories. Now, I've mentioned her earlier before, but this is also something that Kate Kavanagh does. She does a lot of I Tried Writing Like videos, which are wonderful, and they explore a lot of different authors' methods, and it shows you that everyone has their different styles and that those styles don't necessarily match with yours. So trust your own abilities as well. The problem is that if you don't really believe that you're a writer, you can't 100% believe in your story. And if you don't really believe in your story, it's very difficult to finish it. Because how can you picture yourself doing it justice? You can't quite. And if you're not doing it justice, then the story won't come out like that. And then why even finish it? You might even start writing out of some not so great, unhealthy ideas of why you should be writing. You might even start writing because you feel obligated to do so, or because you needed to prove to yourself that you really are a creative person, instead of for the passion and love for the story. And that's so important. So reject those big criteria that you have to fit in to be a writer. And that way you can start building trust in your story and that you are actually the person to tell your story. Giving yourself criteria to fulfill to be a writer is self-sabotage. Instead, let's reframe those criteria as milestones on your author journey. Now, what do I mean by that? So let's start with a ridiculous example first, okay? I mean, I'm sure if you are on AuthorTube, you've seen people do 10K days. What if you think a real writer can do a 10K day, can pull one off? So you're kind of keeping in your mind that, okay, I haven't written 10K in a day, so I'm clearly an amateur. I'm an aspiring writer. First of all, I have done a 10K day. They're crazy and exhausting, and they do not make you a writer. They're a fun experiment to do if you want to do something completely absurd, but they're not a criteria of what you're capable of. Anyway, so let's say you do believe that 10K would make you a real writer. Now, instead of using that as a criteria, let's reframe it as a milestone on your author journey. You're already a writer, but you can now make it a goal and visualize that at one point you'll be able to do that. And if you make it a goal, you make it something to slowly work towards instead of making it I either do that or I'm not. So maybe you can't right now, but in 6 months or in a year, you have learned so much, we were talking in the first belief, that you take in a lot of tools and tricks and you expand your knowledge as you're writing. So maybe in a year, you have expanded your knowledge enough and just have the practice and the habit enough that you can do it. And that's then something that you can celebrate, something exciting that is in your future that you can look forward to instead of making it a requirement right now. That's a bit of a silly example, but let's say it's 2,000 words a day. I know a lot of professional authors somewhat aim for that number. So let's say you think you're going to be a writer if you write 2,000 words a day. Instead of making that your criteria, we can reframe that as a benchmark on your author journey by working towards it. And how can we work towards it? Visualize who the person is that can write consistently 2,000 words a day. What lifestyle do they lead? What things do they believe in? How do they feel about themselves? What's their schedule like? How can they fit it in the day? How are they feeling about the writing in general? And that gives you a lot of lovely hints of how you can get there. So for example, the version of yourself that writes 2,000 words a day gets up an hour earlier. Now, we're not immediately saying, okay, I need to get up an hour earlier or otherwise I'm not a writer. But instead we can see, all right, can we get up 20 minutes earlier consistently? And not necessarily to write it or anything, just to see if we can get a little closer to that version of ourselves. And when we can do that, we know we're slowly stepping into them. One other thing that the 2,000 words a day writer has that maybe your current version doesn't, they're absolutely certain that they're a writer. Otherwise it would be silly. I mean, if they actually sit down every day and write 2,000 words, why would they doubt it? So you know that the version of yourself that has what you want believes this. So you need to start adapting that belief now, because we want to show up as that version. We want to slowly evolve into that version of ourselves so that we can actually get what we want. So if they have an empowering belief like, I'm a writer, duh, we need to start practicing I'm a writer, duh, I'm a writer every time I write already. And that will actually catapult us much quicker to our writing milestones and benchmarks and things that we want to achieve than putting the pressure on ourselves to achieve it immediately and to fill those criteria to show that we're worthy. Internalize those 3 beliefs to put ease back into your writing journey, to get quicker to where you want and have way more fun with it without having to push so hard. To internalize them, you want them to be in your environment and in your thoughts and in your surroundings as often as possible. So what can you do? You can put them on post-it notes, hang them up around your office. You can write them in your journal daily. Just write them out, maybe say them while you're saying that. You can read over them every day, or maybe you can put them on post-it notes and hang them up on your desk and say them, or on your laptop, and say them once before you actually sit down and write. Because that puts them in your mind right during your writing session, and that's going to be very empowering and helpful. You can also make them your affirmations. I know this is something that people have a little bit of resistance to or are a little bit nervous about, and I understand that. I was the same at the beginning, but it can be super, super helpful. What I can recommend if you want to really internalize them, pick a fun instrumental song, pick 3 to 5 beliefs, like maybe you want to add 1 or 2 to them, and then just dance around a little bit, you know, get your juices flowing, get your body flowing. Just have a little bit fun with dancing. That's already going to boost your mood. And just say them a few times. Just tell yourself, yep, I'm a writer every time I write. I'm a writer every time I write. I'm a writer every time I write. Because that will, and if you do that consistently throughout the week, if you can do that every day, that's amazing, because that'll put them into your head. And where we ultimately want to go is to the place that when doubts come up, our brain, you know, looking for the logic and for consistency within everything that we know, brings them up as contradictions. So when doubts come up, those also pop into our head, and they will if we repeat them often enough. And when those also pop into our head, we can start making a decision of like, okay, no, I understand the doubt, I see you, but also this. Because also this is going to slowly transform them into beliefs. Keep feeding your mind arguments for those beliefs as well. Keep feeding your mind reasons why you will know everything you need by the time you need it. Why you're a writer every time you sit down. Why others will love what you love. And then watch your perspective shift. You got this. I believe in you. Let's go write something. Thank you so much for watching. If this video helped you, please like and subscribe and share it with someone who needs a little bit of a pick-me-up as well. You can find us on social media at Story Manifestors and our website at storymanifestors.com, where we have a newsletter where we share more inspiring content. And also we have writing and artistic mindset services there as well, so go check it out. My personal Instagram account is @leah.falls, and I also have this lovely account, which is @Forgotten Splinters. Forgotten Splinters Chronicles is my fantasy book series, which will be coming out next year. And I'm sharing, I'm creating a bit of a fantasy community there. I'm sharing some book related stuff, but also fantasy quotes and mythological creatures, some book recommendations, so go check it out. Thank you so much, that's it, and I hope you keep practicing believing in yourself. We got this, let's write some awesome stories. Have a great week.